All right, welcome to episode 2 of the Rabbit Hole Report. I'm your host, one of your hosts, Chris, and I'm here with the other host, Sammy.
Hello.
All right, today I know we said we are going to talk about like the multiversal theory and other concepts around the Big Bang, and we still are, but we're going to hold off on that for now because we got a really cool topic that we just kind of picked up: the search for infinite energy, where we are with it right now, what the tech even is, and what the world's going to do with it potentially when we get it. Um, Sam, you want to kick us off on like the base concept of infinite energy?
Sure, yeah. So infinite energy, limitless energy, is it possible? Is it not possible? And then basically, how close are we to adopting, let's say, the next step, which would be nuclear energy, nuclear fusion? Um, yeah. So what are the societal repercussions? Why aren't we? So I don't know, dude. I fucked up.
It's all right. I'll cut that part, but
I got a brain fart.
try not to try not to fuck it up too much. You know what? I'm not even going to cut this. This is what happens when you do podcasts. Sometimes you screw up, so we're gonna keep that in actually. Well, the concept around infinite energy, super simple. It's basically you whatever amount of energy you put in, you should get more energy out of it. So like 5 units of energy in, 6 should come out or more.
That's
Boom,
right. Yep.
infinite energy. Super super simple conceptually. Practicality of it is not so super simple. Um, but the concept, as simple as it is, and as hard as it is to implement, it like begs a lot of questions, right? Like, what the hell are we going to do with it? How
Mhm.
do we get it across the planet once we have it? How many of these like crazy reactors do we need? And more
Mhm.
importantly, how does the world, in terms of the governments and in terms of capitalism, how do they react to it? Because if you have infinite energy, does that mean it's free? Does that mean we still have to
Great
pay
question.
for it? Uh, yeah. What do you think is going to happen? Like, let's say it broke out today. Boom, we cracked it. Infinite energy. Let's say I don't know some country overseas. Let's say
Yeah.
Spain. Spain cracked it. What happens next?
I'd have to imagine there'd be massive blowback, particularly from fossil fuel people who have vested interest in fossil fuels being the main source of energy still. Um, I can't imagine they'd just be excited and ready to just give up these multi-billion-dollar industries they built. So I think that'd probably be the first thing we see. A lot of legal battles, a lot of philosophical questions, like you said, is it free? What does that look like in the broader terms of like how people access it? How do we implement it on a wide scale? I think that probably be the first things that start to pop up in people's minds.
Dude, that's honestly that was a great point. The first thing I think about when I hear something like that, like boom, it's a breakthrough. I instantly look at the current infrastructure and what we're using to like move assets around to
Mm-hmm.
transportation, logistics, infrastructure, what currently exists, how we supply energy now, and something crazy, And by the way, this is an opinionated podcast, so fact check me in the comments if you want. I might be wrong, but a huge amount of the current like seafaring vessels carry oil, right? And all of the seafaring vessels most anyway, use some kind of fossil fuel like diesel. A lot of like military uses nuclear, but
Mm-hmm.
not your average ship.
Yeah.
If we were to eliminate the need for fossil fuels, we would need to restructure how like these things work. Now what do we switch to lithium battery ships? I mean, what does that even look like? Do we have something similar to lithium? In terms of ships, we have cars, we have trucks. Have they made a battery powered, seafaring vessel?
Stuff. Yeah.
And how do you even get energy around? There's only so far you can, uh, ship energy without it
Yeah.
losing something. I assume this is where the science kind of overcomes us, but yeah, capitalism's gonna fight back.
Oh, big fight back. They're gonna fight tooth and nail, no doubt.
Yeah,
Until they figure out how to monetize it. You know what I'm saying? Like if the Middle East can get their hands on it and they figure out how to if basically if they could replace their current money making cash cow, and they were able to replace that with this new limitless potential renewable, perfectly renewable energy, then I think that'd be fine. But obviously, they're not just going to let their gas walk out the door, I'd
I
imagine.
think the Middle East totally collapses with infinite energy.
Oh,
I
shit,
think
yeah.
that like their primary export probably being oil, right?
Whew,
All
yeah.
these like Saudi Arabia princes and shit. Like, what happens to them? You know, they're sitting on these they call it black gold, right? Because it's from
Oh,
oil.
yeah.
The mountains
Yep.
of this black gold, and now you're telling me it's worthless. You know what happens
I mean,
to the Emirates and all these other extremely wealthy countries?
crown prince.
Exactly. You know, they're so wealthy because they sit on, rights to these oil wells and everything.
Yeah.
But if that's no longer necessary, what the hell do we do? I mean, I guess you still need
Ooh.
oil for plastic, right?
Yeah, I'd imagine oil doesn't completely go out the door, but I mean, it's obvious that it would take a huge back seat to whatever this new technology is. So yeah, there'd be huge repercussions globally.
Yeah, I mean, it's nuts to think about. Like, would it start a war? Would we see World War III, the energy wars of tomorrow? You know,
The energy wars,
it's like the
man.
discovery. We made a discovery that helps all of humanity, and now the Middle East wants to bomb the shit out of us because
we're just
they
we're just gonna get on the Middle East.
their energy. Well, honestly, Russia exports a ton of natural gas. Well, it used to before the Ukraine-Russian war,
Yeah.
and people in Eastern Europe still do rely on that today, and it still has the potential to produce power and heat homes and so on and
Yeah.
so forth.
So,
But
so they could be a player in it too, potentially.
yeah,
The
well, aren't
hypothetical war.
aren't they a player in everything at this point?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all oil reserves kind of become meaningless. But I mean, hey, there's benefits too, right? Not just the aggression from these capitalistic entities and governments,
Hmm.
but uh, the environment itself, right? I mean,
That's
think
yeah. Honestly, yeah. If you take out the capitalist view of it, and the money making obviously potential and whatnot, but if you look at it from just purely how does this affect the environment, I think that's something that maybe even across the board, nonpartisan, we should all be able to look at it and go like, listen, if there's less emissions going in the air, if there's less oil and gas being sucked out of the dirt, it's better for the earth. So that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, you remember when COVID hit and people stopped driving as much, and businesses weren't as booming, so on and so forth. The 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 economic, no, sorry, not the economic, but the ecosystem healed a little bit from that period of inactivity.
No shit. That makes sense.
Imagine that on a larger scale than it was, right? Because I know there were countries like India and China that said they were stopping, but they didn't really stop.
Yeah.
Imagine if that was no longer the case. Like electric cars are easier to create. There's no more CO2 output to that level. I mean, free energy, hell yeah. I mean, it cleans up the environment in a jiffy. But
Hell yeah, brother. No,
as
you
far
know what's funny, or not funny, but I'd be interested to see what's. I'm sure there were studies done, and maybe different research that was done during, like you said, that COVID period. I wonder if they're able to statistically measure how much the Earth was able to. I guess let's just say heal, like you said, heal. Like what was the air quality improved, and how much was it improved? Were animals populations affected in a pretty good way? I'm sure there's some studies out there.
oh
That'd
yeah.
probably be pretty interesting to see.
Dolphins had returned to certain harbors because of the lack of ship activity, and
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, dude.
whales are happier, right? Most whales are harmed in some way from the vibrations from a lot of seafaring vessels, and
That that, and I heard they get killed all the time because they intersect with the paths of large ships that are obviously going about their way. So if these ships aren't moving, it's like what if the whale population uh
explodes.
it skyrocketed in that 2 to 3 4 year period of COVID.
I might have. I remember there was a lot of dolphins in the water. When I was still in the Navy,
Yeah,
we would go out to the international waters by Catalina Island, and the amount of dolphins, it was just nuts, man. I mean, they just dance along the ship. Sometimes they die, but mostly they dance. Um, but I don't know about the negative aspects of infinite energy, like the dangers around it.
so we talked about war. What else though? I'm trying to think what else could there be potential
Well, the actual danger around the technology itself, like using the
itself.
technology, is something I could think of because
Hmm.
Here's like a short breakdown of how it works. Essentially, it uses heat in order to hyperboil water to create steam to then power generators. Right.
This is nuclear fusion you're talking about, right?
This is yeah, fusion, not fission. It's
Okay.
fusion. I'm pretty sure. Again, fact check us, in the comments because we're dumb and this is an opinionated podcast. But the way it works is that you have this gigantic magnet that constantly rotates in a series of shells to keep the plasma moving in a circle so that it won't have time to cool down. And
Hmm.
the actual plasma comes from the collision of hydrogen, right? Just like the sun. And Sammy, do you know what an isotope is?
I'd have to be reminded. What is it?
An isotope is essentially a different version of an element on the periodic table. Like
That's right. Yep.
if hydrogen has an extra neutron or a proton, it is now an isotope of hydrogen. So there are two
Hmm.
that are used primarily in nuclear fusion or fission. Fact check me. It's deuterium and tritium, which are just it's an extra neutron, I believe, from the base, hydrogen atom itself. And
Hmm.
so they take deuterium, which is very, very abundant in the world. We have like millions and millions of years of available
Really?
deuterium, but tritium is not. It only has a shelf life of, or a half life of 15 years. So we've got to artificially create tritium. So that's kind of like a handicap that we have for the technology. But anyway, what we do is we take deuterium and we smash it into tritium at very, very high speeds. And that collision causes the formation of plasma and heat. And we do that constantly, constantly, constantly. And you use magnetic fields to rotate it so that
Hmm.
it stays hot. Once it's hot enough, and it gets hot, and this is the danger, it gets something like 15 to 50 times hotter than the core of the sun, which is
Ooh.
absolutely insane.
Yeah, it's wild.
We take it and then we shuffle it out of the main generator area into an area where it can contact with fluid like water, where it hypervaporizes, shoots itself over to a steam generator, and boom, energy, which is awesome. That's exactly what we want to have happen. But the danger itself is, well, what happens to Earth's atmosphere if it connects with a heat source 50 times hotter than the core of the sun?
Hmm.
I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but I can't say that it's good.
Can't imagine it'd be good.
No, not at all, man. And the reason, to my understanding, that we have to have it so hot is because the way that fusion works in the sun
Hmm.
is that it's super hot, but there's also a lot of gravity because it's so big, right?
Gotcha.
We can recreate the heat, but we can't recreate the gravity because we don't have anything on Earth that would possibly come close to the mass of the sun.
That
So
makes sense.
in order to compensate and get that plasma moving, we have to get it way, way, way hotter than the sun for that chain reaction to occur. And yeah, I don't know how it sounds like science fiction, but it's happening right now in real time. And like some Chinese company just did like something nuts, like an hour straight of holding the plasma in sustainment. And countries over in Europe are doing the same thing. They're like battling each other,
Wow.
to get the longest, stable, I don't know, field of plasma they can.
Hmm.
Eventually, if they can keep it 24 hours, it's constant, and boom, we've cracked it.
Shit.
Infinite energy, which is
We're getting close.
getting really. If I'm going to be honest, I think China's going to do it first, man. I think China
I
is
wouldn't
going
be
to do it first.
surprised. They're so competitive, those bastards.
And we used to be competitive too. Unfortunately, not anymore. But the United States, that is. But China is crushing it right now. Not in terms of like civil liberties. They're not so great at giving their citizens freedom in
Hmm.
the aspect that the United States does. But
Just minor things.
yeah, they are crushing it in green energy right now. They have something like tens of thousands of acres of solar, and
Wow.
and they're reducing their CO2 output every year by insane amounts. They're controlling their population growth, which is still pretty outrageous, But
Hmm.
I mean, they're crushing it, and if they get the infinite energy going, they are going to be our Atlantis.
Wow. Way to go, China. Keep it up.
Yeah, but
Xi Jinping, if you're listening. Good shit, bro.
yeah, please stop with all of the like social credit thing, but keep killing it at fission.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I
No,
want
you know what this kind of reminds me of to an earlier point we were talking about,
what?
where it's like what players would obviously have a they wouldn't be so keen to accept this new technology. It kind of reminds me, I think this happened back in the late 90s, maybe you've heard about it. There was a guy, and this is all alleged, but I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, there was a guy who created a car that was able to run on either hydrogen or maybe it was even water. He created something like that, and I'm pretty sure he ended up being killed.
Huh?
Jamie, can you pull that up?
Yeah, yeah, Jamie, get that on the screen.
Yeah,
I
on
think
the
I've
double.
I think I've heard about this. I didn't know
Yeah.
that it was the '90s. I thought the conspiracy was earlier, but I mean, so that's a good point. Are you saying like what other conflicting technologies could there be with something like
I
infinite
guess
energy?
I
Or
guess the point I'm trying to yeah, I guess the point I'm trying to say is in the past, and like I said, I have to fact check this, but I'm pretty sure this was kind of done where someone had figured out an energy source that would be in great contention to the fossil fuel industry, and if I'm true, or if this is correct, I think he was taken out. So imagine that
boom.
on the scale, you know.
Well, the thing is, I think the difference between something like that and what's happening today is that the single person by himself is vulnerable to,
Mm-hmm.
you know, government operatives, but we now have like government led projects that are going towards this. So it's no longer like, oh, we need to take out Jack
It's
Smith
not
because
brain.
he's about to break integrity. You know, like no,
Yeah.
it's we have teams and teams of people who are cracking or close to cracking this technology, and so if conflict does happen, again, in my opinion, it's going to happen at the government scale. So we're talking about, embargoes and tariffs and potential war.
Yeah, not just one-off assassinations.
Yeah. And a great question you had was what countries are or organizations are going to have a hard time, allowing this to exist. And I got to say, the United States probably either wouldn't outright accept it immediately or would fight against it to keep a couple more years of the fossil fuel industry going
I could totally see that. Yeah.
to our own detriment as well.
Yeah.
Like we could obviously benefit from infinite energy here in the States, but would they let us benefit from it?
Got to squeeze those last couple dollars out. I
Yeah,
actually did
exactly.
pull this up. Take this with a grain of salt, but this does appear. I've seen a lot of stories on this. In 1998, Stanley Meyer died in what many of his supporters believe was an assassination. Myers was claimed to have built a dune buggy that ran on water. He took his claims to two Belgian investors. Myers and his brother said that he had been poisoned, and many of his supporters believe he was assassinated to suppress his invention.
Man,
So, yeah,
I
maybe that, yeah.
that's nuts, man. I wonder what kind of tech it was because it's got to be something unknown to us in the moment, right? Because like we know how hydrogen engines work, we know how steam engines work. That's all water.
Yeah,
What the hell did he crack? Like what process did he
it's a great
did he
question.
figure
Yeah.
out? Was it some super spongy absorbent engine that somehow turned static water into momentum? I couldn't tell you.
Right. It's like what did he know that scientists and researchers across the world like
That
they
we
couldn't figure
don't.
out.
The X Files this week. Stanley Yelnats in the '90s or whatever his name was.
Oh, yeah, man.
No, conspiracy theories are awesome, especially when it comes to things like technology. I find them really fascinating because they're either like steeped in a lot of truth or they're
Mm-hmm.
just fucking stupid and they're based
Yeah.
on absolutely nothing. Like a lot of the ancient alien conversations always kind of broach something that's like, oh, this could really be possible. They're onto something, and then
It's
they
like almost plausible. Yeah.
take a leap off the edge that's like, and then they use their alien dildos to control the Illuminati. It's like, oh god, you had me
You almost yeah.
at levitation devices to lift
Yeah.
10-ton concrete blocks, but I can't hold onto the dildo thing. I can't do it. But yeah, for infinite energy, I mean, God, how many people thought even 10 years ago, that was total science fiction. And they would hear that out loud and they go, infinite energy? Like, isn't that like one of Newton's laws that you can't,
Energy
create?
can't be created; it can only be transferred.
What's the thing everyone's always trying to copy, and there's always YouTube videos about it. That's like using like momentum to create infinite energy or something. There's a
Oh yeah, there's a word for it. I've seen it before too. Basically,
yeah
obviously, it never actually works, but it's almost like this idea that's so close to being real, and like it's so close to seeming like it'll work, but it just physically it just can't.
And they always fool you too. It's always something that you're like, oh, is this actually what's going on? And then they use magnets constantly. Like if you take
Yeah.
this magnet in the middle and you have magnets on the outside and you start spinning it, it'll spin forever. Boom, infinite energy. But that's just not how science works. And that's it. Also makes me wonder, like the science behind the infinite energy. Like if that's true, like conservation
Mhm.
of mass or whatever. You can't create or destroy energy. All of Newton's wonderful laws. How the hell are we creating infinite energy from these fusion reactors? And I think the answer is that um, once you get the plasma to a certain temperature,
Mhm.
then magnetic uh, fields keep it hot,
Oh,
right? So you do have to waste a lot of energy getting it really hot, but once you get it to a certain temperature, it stays hot. So you can keep dumping fuel into it to keep the process, the chain reactions going, and
interesting. Yeah.
while siphoning off some of the heat to create energy with, like steam, right?
Wow.
And so it's not really like you're creating energy from nothing. You're just maintaining a state of heat, uh, and using that static heat to
Mhm.
create energy in a different way.
Very interesting.
Yeah, the men much smarter than us have that figured out, but
And
I just learned about isotopes, so we're lagging behind a little bit. Uh, what about you? What governments do you think, aside from like the obvious ones like the United States,
Mhm.
would step in to slap the shit out of anyone proposing infinite energy?
Uh, well, I mean, yeah, I think the United States would try to squeeze the last few dollars they could out of it. If they did adopt it, it'd probably be a couple of years after everyone else did. I think obviously, like we said earlier, the Middle East, Russia potentially, maybe India, maybe I don't know, just because they seem to
Oh,
already have a huge problem with
everything.
yeah, they just don't seem. I'm pretty sure on the global scale, they're like the number one producer of CO2 emissions. They just don't seem to really
Yeah.
prioritize our atmosphere. So I don't know if maybe they'd also be like, we're gonna keep working on our own shit. I don't know.
No, I mean, isn't every video you see where like you have these rivers of plastic? Isn't it always India?
Oh God,
It's yeah.
usually India. It's either India or Ohio.
And India, from what I've seen, is such a beautiful country. The culture in
Yeah,
India, it can be very, very welcoming. Aside from obviously some extremist religious stances,
yeah,
and overall, like I mean, it's full of intelligent people, but the government doesn't give a fuck about them. Doesn't care about it. They don't push policies around the ecosystem,
yeah.
plastic waste, CO2 emissions, fucking anything around like worker safety. Every video you see about some awful thing that's happened to a worker comes from two places. It comes from China or it comes from India.
Oh yeah,
But China cares about CO2, I think.
yeah.
So at least they have that going for them.
Brownie points.
Yeah.
Didn't they just put an engine on the moon?
They an Indian on the moon. No,
Indian.
they put a flag on the moon. It was an unmanned shuttle from India. And dude, they were pretty bitter about some of the feedback they got from the internet about that. It was like a lot of people like, hell yeah, India, 80 years late to
Yeah.
the race. And the blowback from India was like, well, at least we're doing it. Like it might have
Uh,
taken us longer, but we're here. It's like, yeah, you put a flag on the moon. That's awesome. Good job, India, for putting a flag on the moon. Please
oh
stop
God.
killing the planet.
Anyways,
Please stop
yeah.
killing the planet. Please, for the love of God, put a
I
filter on
could.
something.
Oh yeah, right. I could be wrong, but also I don't know if you know this. Wasn't the rocket? Didn't they say it was like quite rudimentary?
Quite rudimentary. So I don't know too much about combustion rockets. I couldn't tell you about it, but I did hear that they had. It was pretty much like a shucking up bottle of Coca Cola, I think,
Yeah, yeah.
and they had a guy kick it with his heel, and it shot up real high. And
That's
yeah,
that's what I heard too. I heard this thing barely made it out the solar or the It barely made it to space.
Whether that's true or not, I have no idea. But I'm sure. Well, the rocket made it to the moon, so they did it with modern technology. America did do it, with 80-year-old technology, but we're not.
No big
We're
deal.
not. And we had men on ours. We're about to get instantly hacked by a bunch of pissed off Indians. I know it. All right. You know what? I think that's it for today's episode. We had a really good discussion on infinite energy and a lot of dumbass back and forth about what it could mean. We're not scientists. We're average Joes with average IQs and really opinionated stances on things. So correct us in the comments. Again, this is the Rabbit Hole Report. I'm Chris, and this is my co-host Sammy. And
See you next time.
yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.